everyone. Welcome back to the Critic-Verse. Today we're here for a review of Bel-Air Season 2, Episodes 1 through 3. So first off, I was going to do a breakdown and review for just Episode 1, but the streaming service dropped all 3 episodes at once. So we're going to be doing just a review for all 3 episodes, each in their own individual portions. So let's get to it. Okay, let's start off with episode 1, titled A Fresh Start, which is referring to the fact that the Banks family, including Will, all need a fresh start after the drama that unfolded at the end of last season. This episode is such a great start to the season because it's a continuation or also a new beginning, an establishment of this new status quo after a short 2-week time jump. Will gets a dream similar to last season, but also mixed with Aunt Viv's painting of him, which showed him sitting on the throne with a crown. Will has been talking to everyone in the family except Uncle Phil, who he's still mad at because Uncle Phil made the decision to fire Jeffrey after Jeffrey revealed the information about his father. Will has been staying at Jazz's place, where we get to see that Jazz is a practicing Muslim. We know this because Will interrupts his prayer, and it's good to see that we're delving more into Jazz's character, and he's not just Will's goofy sidekick like he was in the original series. Jazz's relationship with Hillary is also another addition onto his character from The Fresh Prince, since that version used to chase after Hillary, but it seems like in this version he's more aloof and more cool, which makes Hillary more attracted to him. Hillary got rid of one boss last season with Kylo, but might have a new one with Ivy because you can clearly feel the power difference in the two, since Ivy is the one with all the money and the followers and has now been in control of the house, while Hillary is in charge of managerial duties, which makes her more of an assistant to Ivy than a partner. We then get to see that Carlton is on the outs with his original friend group, which also promotes a stronger relationship between him and Will, as they're now always shown together whenever they're at Bel-Air Academy. We get introduced to the Black Student Union, which provides a new love interest for Carlton, but also provides a new conflict for this season, as Carlton once again has to prove his blackness after last season of only hanging out with a white crowd, especially his all-white sports team. The new love interest that was shown for Will in the Season 2 trailer has been given a name, Jackie, and she's believed to be Bel-Air's adaptation of Jackie Ames from the original series, which was formerly portrayed by Tyra Banks, now being played by actress Jaslyn Martin. Funny thing about the Jackie character is in the original series, she was Will's friend from back in West Philly, but in this show, she's a California native who is right off the bat introduced as Will's love interest. The one-on-one match against Big Dre that Will had really highlights how the actor Jabari Banks has emulated the real Will Smith. Every facial gesture / head movement he makes reminds me of the same gestures that Will used to make in the original series. A really good shot in the episode was the scene where Uncle Phil approaches Will to talk and reconnect, and you can see Lisa in the background also coming to Will, but Uncle Phil got there first. And just after they leave, the camera jumps to Lisa. Will tells Lisa he wants to put a pause on their relationship, which is definitely used to further set up his new potential love interest with Jackie. Will moving back home was wrapped up in the first episode thanks to 2 separate scenes of Jeffrey talking to both Will and Uncle Phil, and while I would have liked the whole being out of the Bel-Air bubble plotline to go a little bit further, I'm glad it was wrapped up in the way that it was because it felt earned and it felt like both characters learned something from their time apart. Only half the family has established conflicts while the other half has their conflicts set up. Carlton, while trying to get closer to a new love interest, gets pushed into the Black Student Union by Will and his history with his blackness in the school. Ashley's favorite English teacher, played by the original Ashley Banks, comes under fire after she provides Ashley with unapproved reading only because she got a snitch in her class. Vivian's vision gets co-opted by Reed's influence in the art world, and she has to see how to not let her mission of propping up the underrepresented gets co-opted by Reed's superficial influence, so he can't rewrite her narrative. Episode 2 is titled Speaking Truths, probably in a reference to all of the characters at some point speaking their truth on how they're treated and how they want to be treated. And let me say, it's another banger to follow up episode 1. It starts with the basketball game and ends with the basketball game, and both games' outcomes depend on the mindset Will has going into it. If Will listens to his coach, they lose. Will listens to Doc and calls his own plays, and they win. Back in West Philly, as shown in Season 1, Will's team relied on him for the win. In Bel-Air, the coach tries to focus on teamwork, but it will cost them the game. Doc seems to be easily manipulating Will by playing on his insecurities on how the game goes when he doesn't play by his own rules. In Ashley's plotline, we see the effect that background characters can have on the story, as a character, let's call her the Snitch, is eyeing the special attention Ashley is getting from Mrs. Hughes and tells her parents, who then in turn get the teacher fired because she's giving Ashley reading that is unapproved by the school. Jazz and Hillary's plotline is reflecting the real-life aspect of being in a relationship with a female social media influencer. And Hillary doesn't post Jazz for the reason that she doesn't want people in their relationship. And in real life, fans, followers, or subscribers can have a habit of prying into the lives of an influencer and disrupting their offline relationships. But she also says she doesn't post him to maintain a sense of availability, which is when an attractive female influencer appears single to appeal to a male fan base, which can cater to their fantasies of said female influencer. But Hillary does extend an olive branch to Jazz by introducing him to her parents as her boyfriend. Carlton is shown to want to dial back on his meds, and he says to his father they're causing him to lose sleep, which it does, as we see later in the episode. But also, he claims that his grades are slipping. But later in the episode, we hear Lisa asking him if he got the perfect score on the test. So which one of them was he lying to? In an attempt to get closer to Doc, Will attempts to get closer to Jackie by going to a late-night club with Carlton and Jazz. But this works on two folds as he gets closer to Doc, but does actually get closer to Jackie and finds out that she is Doc's niece. We get the reconciliation scene between Phil and Jeffrey a bit sooner than expected, but I believe they just want to return to the status quo of Season 1 before stuff starts to get really chaotic. Phil believes Jeffrey went against his wishes with Will and Lou because of his own issues with his own son that he may have to face later on in the season. Jeffrey states he did it after Phil flexed his position and his wealth on him, which, in my opinion, was out of line. Carlton, after hearing from Ashley that Miss Hughes got fired, raises the issue at the BSU meeting, and she's a teacher most of them had in middle school, and they want to protest after Will suggests it because of the lack of action that Carlton threw at them in the last episode. Throughout the episode, Aunt Viv has a hard time getting in touch with Reed, but at the time of their meeting, he cancels without notice. They probably couldn't get the actor back, but Viv's main concern is that Reed is controlling her narrative by overriding her article from the last episode. News of the protest has the faculty advisor putting the squeeze on Carlton and trying to leverage a prestigious honor he and Lisa were talking about earlier in the episode against him. Will is pulled closer into Doc's clutches after following his advice and getting the exact outcome that he wanted. He ignored his coach's play and still got the W. But Uncle Phil is not going to let this guy get his hands on Will that easily, because he senses that this guy has an ulterior motive and that Will is hanging on his every word. Episode 3 is titled Compromised, which has a twofold meaning on the Black Student Union and Carlton. Now, this was a great episode, but this was also the shortest episode of the first 3 released, maybe of the series as a whole, at 39 minutes, give or take some seconds, making it almost 40, which is weird for a streaming service show. Most hour-long dramas are that length because they need to fit in commercials, so it's just weird to see a show of this genre on a streaming service with this runtime. Will's showboating or selfishness on the court is even getting to his one friend on the team, showing West Philly Will may be great at basketball, but he's not a great team player, and he's truly conceited. The BSU's faculty advisor is still pressing Carlton about shutting down the protests. Carlton questions her intentions, whether it's about his award or a promotion that she applied for. And she reiterates to Carlton that he needs to get the others on program or his award is on the line. Will is then shown to be able to play the game as he talks nice to Miss Bassett, but in the next scene shows he heard part of their conversation at least, enough to grill Carlton about it privately. In this episode, the Mrs. Hughes protest becomes a plotline that involves all the main characters, and they question whether if justice does prevail and if the protest will be successful. Will continues his wingman duties to Carlton to push him to getting more FaceTime with his crush, while Uncle Phil asks Will to keep an eye on Carlton since he's starting to wean off his meds. Last episode, Hillary reintroduced Jazz as her boyfriend to her parents, and this episode, Hillary follows up asking their opinion on Jazz, and her mother name drops a previous boyfriend who may make an appearance later. Carlton is told to make a speech at the protest, putting far more pressure on his shoulders. The real-life protests for George Floyd were referenced to give weight and levity to the power of protests by a new side character for this season named Drew. And while Will has a new love interest, he still doesn't want anyone else to make a move on Lisa, which is kind of selfish in my opinion, but hey, this is West Philly Will. Lisa's story this season becomes intertwined with Aunt Viv because she needs an assistant and probably to further distance her from Will while also keeping her in the story. A really interesting scene is that Ashley invited Mrs. Hughes to the protest meeting, and Uncle Phil and Aunt Viv were surprised by that, which was weird, but after they talked to Mrs. Hughes off screen, they try to shift the message of the kids' protest because Mrs. Hughes knowingly broke the rules, so her getting fired was her own responsibility. In the first 2 episodes, Will wears his uniform as normal, but the day of the protest, Will switches his jacket inside out like the first season because of its fire design, but also it's a sign of his own identity, while also being an homage to the jacket that Will wore in the original Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Also, on the morning of the protest, before the kids go to school, Carlton's anxiety begins to ramp up after Ashley tells him her school threatened any student going to protest with suspension. And you can tell because he starts to grasp at his collar, showing a sign of feeling that he's being choked. One thing I didn't mention earlier is the dynamic of the influencer house, since it was a major plotline of season 1, but has continued on to season 2. Since Ivy bought the house and Hillary tries to negotiate a brand deal for the house, but they can't go through with the brand deal if the member of the household with the most followers isn't on board with it, which does cause a strain between her and Hillary's relationship, furthering the strain at least, as the past 2 episodes have shown a strain in the relationship. The Black Student Union compromises on the protest, but West Philly Will doesn't agree. But this puts more pressure on Carlton when they come up with a new plan which is a stressor in his anxiety attack. The episode ends with Will taking matters into his own hands after Carlton's anxiety gets the better of him, but who knows what the consequences of his actions will be. Alright guys, this was a little different from my usual videos, but the volume at which the episodes were released, I needed to compromise. See what I did there? But next week, I'll either go back to breakdown and reviews for episode 4, or just keep it at the reviewing portion, which will depend on the reception I get from this video. Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time in the Critic-Verse.